people can see all this screen, that is the towns that we worked in from 1948 until 1975. In 75, I decided it was time to change occupations, so we quit digging ditches and went in the apartment business. And so, where do I start? Okay, most of you know that I was in the World War II and come out, and when I come home, I had 3 jobs offered to me, and a man wanted me to go in partnership on a dragline, which is this little item here, and so we formed a partnership and put an order in for a new machine, and it took 5 months to get it. And in that 5 months, I had an ice route where I carried ice out into farmers because we didn't have refrigerators back in those days. And the fall come and the dragline came, and we did, I think, about 3 months of different work. And we did a job over by the Playtime south of Rose Hill. And the man, when I give him the bill, he thought it was too much. So I thought, well, I am still learning. And so I marked 4 hours off, and he was unhappy about this. My partner was, and he decided he wanted to buy me out or sell out. And I thought, well, what am I going to do? I'm living at home, 20 years old, and waiting for my girlfriend to get out of high school. And so I decided that I would buy him out, and I borrowed money from a couple different people and paid him off, and then struggled. And there was a man that had been in high school with that we played football. Carl Sofer was his name, and he had been around a dragline because his father had operated a machine. And Carl says, I want to go to work for you, Wells. And I says, well, I don't have any guarantee of anything. So he signed up for the GI Bill. And I was supposed to teach him how to run a machine. But he actually taught me more about it. And this GI Bill, at that time the wages was $200 a month. And we only had to pay him $25 a month for a hired man. And that was a plus, because we had some pretty slim, rough times getting started there. He worked for me a couple of years, and he went to work for a bridge contractor. In the meantime, things kind of picked up, and we did different jobs, different places. And I had an uncle that had a patch of coal out by 5 Points that needed a dragline, so he hired me to strip coal one winter, and that was unusual for a little machine to work all winter long. So he paid me $9 an hour plus the fuel, and I saved up enough money that winter to buy a second machine, and that was a Shield Bantam mounted on an Army half-track. Then we could dig little trenches, and we started moving small jobs and digging basements and sewers and water lines. So, and of course in the meantime we got married. And we had moved in a little house on South 11th Street and was there for 3.5 years. And one of my other buddies come along, and he had just got married, and his wife liked that house, so he wanted to buy our house. So we decided we'd sell out because I thought I could build one better. And we ended up on K Avenue West with a house that was too big. It was basement and first floor and second floor. And while we were there, we had 3 little girls, and my wife was carrying clothes from the upstairs, cleared the basement to wash them. And she decided that was too many steps. So we sold that out, and I went out and bought 5 acres on the 9th Avenue East and started a subdivision. And we built several houses around then. And one of the houses that we built, I didn't get it sold, and an ad come out in the paper, for sale 110 acres southeast of town, will trade for town property. So I called up Mr. White right away, and he says, well, these people work over at Vermeer's, and could come on Saturday and look at your house. So they come on a Saturday, and they looked at it. We went out and looked at this farm, and I was very happy with it. And they was asking $40,000, and I had this house to trade in on the farm, and I had $5,000 in cash. And we assumed their mortgage, and so I was 30 years old when I bought my first farm. And that was a plus, because buying machinery, the machinery depreciate and less value. And so now, in order to build that house and have that $5,000, we did, I'll back up here a minute. In 1952, Fremont let a little job, I think it was $6,000 or $8,000, and Hillis Brown, the plumber, he got the job, and I encouraged him to bid it because I wanted to do the digging. And he had a man that had worked for the Oskaloosa Water Department, and so he knew how to cut the cast iron pipe in two, put the fittings in, and get everything back on, because that was one thing, when you cut the city's water off, you need to get it back on as soon as possible. And so Cecil Allgood was his name. He was a good teacher. And so he kind of taught me how to do this. And so we did that little job, and then I think it was 4 years or 3 years later, the town of Lighton let a job that was a little less than 7,000. There was 6,000 plus to do the whole town. And so we did that one, and then the next big job was over at Keswick, and that was like $28,000 or $9,000, and the engineer on that job was the county engineer over at Sigourney, so we didn't have much trouble getting along with them. A lot of times the engineers kind of get on your back and want you to do certain things that they got written in the specifications. And so, and it was an open winter, it didn't freeze, and so we was able to do the whole job in the winter, and that's where I was able to get the $5,000 to put on the farm. And so from, that was 1956, and we had built these 2 houses on the corner and traded the one on the farm. And that same year, we sold the second house that we was living in. So we had to move again. And I need a drink of water.
Hang on just a second.
That's
Hang on.
okay.
I'll get you yours.
Mine's over there. And So we worked in a lot of little towns. Sheridan was one that we did several different jobs in. And most of the work that we done was engineered by Garden Engineering. They had Merrill Garden, of course, and John Hessling and John Stedham were the two young engineers there. And John Hessling, if he had a little project that didn't warrant advertising in the Des Moines paper for a bidder, he would come to me and say, Wells, you can do this job over here. And he'd tell me how much money to charge, which was quite convenient back then. And so from where we lived on South 15th Street, we ended up remodeling a house on South 2nd Street, right by the old Nazarene Church. That's where that apartment house is now. And we lived there for 10 years. And it seemed like we accumulated a little more money when you didn't keep moving. And so while we was there, one of the few jobs that we lost money on was down at the Iowa Valve. And we had a young engineer from Alabama down there at Clow, and he didn't understand about frost and a lot of things and cold weather, and he wanted us to work through the winter, and we had a 4-inch rain. I think it was on January the 4th. So that kind of shut the project down. And with the experience I'd had with him, and everything was going bad. So I hired a man by the name of Ed Prothero to come in and finish the job. And that relieved me to go on and do other work. We had a job over by Iowa City Lone Tree at the time. And you know, another thing, when you bid these jobs, you had to put up a certified check when you turned your bid in, and they would keep the check until you produced a completion bond. And so you had to have a bonding company that guaranteed the town that he was going to complete the job and guarantee his work for 1 year. And you had to have so much equity in different things before the bonding company would take you on. Well, would you believe I had 2 or 3 jobs that hadn't finished, and I needed somebody to just countersign my note, more or less. And so with me, the man that did that was Charlie Brown, the insurance man. He thought I would get the job done, so he signed it. And of course that was a good thing to have support that way. And we had 2 different men that worked for me for, well, one of them for 18 years and the other one for 21 years. And once you had a good crew, that was great. You always could count on them. So if I wasn't on the job, they would be doing something. And the bidding was quite interesting to me, because you went to these lettings and it'd be anywhere from, I think, three or four guys up. The one job in Prairie City, there was 13 bidders, and that was a storm sewer job. And would you believe I was low by $85 out of 13 bidders? Yeah, and that was a great year, because when we finished that job, we went to Centerville on another big job. And of course, that's one of the secrets to that bidding, was that you needed the guy supplying the cast iron pipe. If you had one that could give you 2 or 3 cents a foot off of the total cost of the pipe, that really made a difference. We had a man named Ronald Lance that was from someplace over in Indiana, and he was always on my side. There was about 4 different pipe manufacturers in the United States. There was a Birmingham, a Wayne cast iron, and then there was one over at Omaha, Nebraska later. And of course, Clow always had pipe. And there was, up until 1966, cast iron was about the leading pipe that we buried. There was a asbestos cement called transite. There was there were a few towns that put that in, and it was supposed to resist the acid that would be in the soil that would eat up cast iron. And then plastic come on in 66, and we had 3 big jobs in that 66 that when you got the job, these were farmers' home jobs, farmers' administration, and they took so long to get their paperwork done. If you bid a job 1 year, it wasn't until the next year that they would let you go ahead and do it. So we had these 3 jobs ready to go, and the closest one was Tracy, and that was 33,000 feet of pipe. Well, when you bid these jobs, the manufacturer of the pipe, they would bring the pipe out and deliver before the time to get it out of their yard. So here we had 33,000 pieces of pipe laying in Tracy, but no contract signed. And of course, Merrill Garden, if you knew him, he grew up in Tracy. And I said to Merrill, and I said, well, my crew is ready to go, the pipe is there, but we don't have a contract. And I says, do you care if I go ahead and do it? He says, well, it'd be up to you'd be doing it on your own. And he says, okay. So when before we got the paperwork signed, we had the water line all in. So when we signed the paper, I give them a bill and they give me a check. And from there, then we went over to Mystic and worked on that 66,000 feet. Yeah. And we were busy. You know, and overall, I figured up we buried close to 1 million feet of pipe. Yeah. And besides the transite and the plastic and the cast iron, those 3. Now, when it come to sewer, there was clay pipe, and then there was a pipe that they manufactured called Orangeburg, and that was made out of corn stalks and stuff, and that stuff would collapse, and it made a lot of people go back and dig up their sewers. And then, of course, finally the plastic took over on all sanitary and storm and water mains. And it is much better and much lighter to handle, to get in the ditch. And of course, the engineers over at Tracy, the one problem with the plastic, we found this out with a little 2-inch line that Bob Lynn had bought a turkey place over by Pleasantville, and he wanted this well hooked up to his turkey house, and so we went over there with a Jeep trencher and laid 2,000 feet of plastic, 2-inch plastic pipe, and we welded it together, laid out in the hot sun, and it expanded. We put it in the bottom of the ditch, which was quite a few degrees cooler, and it contracted and pulled apart. So I got a call at 10 o'clock at night from Bob, says, you got a leak over there and we need that water. And would you believe that Clayton Cool, who did a lot of building for us, was into my house, and he says, well, I'll go with you, Wells. So the two of us drove over there in the middle of the night, and I knew what I was going to have to do. Yeah. So it was another experience. But this Certainteed was the name of the manufacturer of the biggest plastic water main, and they made what they called a deep socket joint. And it was, instead of being 2 inches, it was like 6 or 8 inches. The bigger the pipe, the deeper it was. You'd paint the glue on, and you'd push together and twist it. But when you got up to 6 and 8 inches of pipe, it was hard to twist. And of course, you don't realize that this pipe was, the first ones were 40 feet long. Cast iron was always 20 feet. But those plastic would come in one, like the town of Tracy, one semi brought 33,000 feet of pipe and delivered it because they telescoped the 2 and the 4 inch inside. Yeah. Now, the most profitable job that we had was down in southeast Iowa, and that was Pilot Grove, Denmark, and
St. Paul.
St. Paul, thank you, John. And we figured we would do 11,000 feet, or 1,100 feet a day. And when we got through, we had done 2,200 feet a day. And we bought a little trencher, a ditch witch, they called it. And we'd only dig 8 inches wide. And of course, you don't realize, but from Des Moines and north all the way down across that, you didn't have to bury the pipe as deep. Every 30 miles or so, they would subtract 6 inches. So down there, we was only going 4 foot deep, where if you was in Ankin in those towns, it was 5 foot, 5.5, yeah. So when we got through with that job that summer, well, actually it wasn't through, but we turned in an estimate every month, and I can remember turning in that one estimate, and I got $20,000, and I went out and bought 51 acres of farm ground, which was, of course, when I went home and told my wife I'd paid $800 and some an acre, she blew her stack. That was one reason why that I incorporated, was so I didn't have to tell her everything. Yeah, you know, earlier on in my work, I worked for Bill Bernstein. And of course, Bill says one of the secrets to success is never tell your wife how much money you're making. Yeah.
Vernie, could you talk about your map that you have for us?
Your map.
What about that? Well, if you want to pick out a town up there, somebody, I can tell you what year we did it and how big it was.
Oh.
Well, I'll pick one out. Newburgh, which is north of Grinnell, was only 50 population. And that was one of those jobs that the farmer's home didn't get the paperwork done. We bid it one year and we didn't do it till the next year.
How about the one down by Burlington, where you did that, one of those first jobs you did?
But Burlington, one of the first jobs down in Burlington.
That was building the levee.
Yes, that was building a levee.
Yeah.
It was very discouraging for him.
And that was a one that lasted 10 weeks, and me and my GI Bill man, $25 a month, we spent 10 weeks down there building a levee out of sand, and when we got through, we went away with $56 a day. And we worked 8 to 12 hours a day. Yeah, it was a long, drawn-out process. I got tired of going down there and not, I knew we wasn't making any money. Yeah, okay.
I have a story. When you go to coffee, you learn some things. I had a neighbor named Ed McLansborough, and Ed remembers when Vernon was hauling ice, and he backed in his barnyard one day, and when he went to leave, he did something, and the ice went out the back of the truck. Did it, Vernon?
Yeah,
And it was in the barnyard, and they dusted her all off, put her back in the truck, and down the road he went.
Well, I was 10 miles out in the country, and the ice hadn't melted. It might have been a little dirty, but you know that ice box didn't care whether it was clean or not. Yeah. So we worked in the towns around Des Moines. We worked in Altoona, Bondurant.
Urbandale, maybe?
The
You got Urbandale on here.
Yeah, well, Urbandale was in downtown Des Moines.
Okay.
And we put a water line over in an industrial park on the east side. And would you believe we went underneath a railroad track? And I think within a week or 2 weeks after we did that, on the television news, there was a water line underneath a railroad track. And I thought, man alive, I hope that isn't mine. It wasn't the one we went under. Okay, accidents that happened over the years. We had a man that got his leg broke down in a ditch when we had they put a plug in the end of a cast iron pipe. And there was a valve over here and 20 feet of pipe or 30 feet. And when you open that valve, it will compress the air in there. Now, you can't compress water, but you can compress air. And when they took the plug out of the end of that pipe, he was standing in the wrong place, and that cap went out and hit him, broke his leg. And this happened in December of 1962. So I had to go get his wife and drive to Des Moines and go to the hospital with her. And one other job, we was working down in Centerville, and we had a man that was, well, I can't remember, Nick was his name. He was pushing dirt back in the trench and on a little bulldozer. And I don't know, I was up there and I turned around, and here he was all slumped over on the front of this little bulldozer, still running. And so this Alfred Six knew him, and he knew that he had had heart trouble, and he had a heart attack on that dozer and died right there. And that was quite shocking, and I had to go tell his wife. So I took one of the workers with me to go to that night to go tell her that her husband had passed away on the job. Yeah. That was, life deals a lot of funny things. Now, most of the work that I did the jobs were anywhere from $30,000 to $40,000, and then there was a lot of them that was up 75. I think the largest one was down in Montrose, Iowa, which is clear down the southeast corner. And would you believe there was 5 bidders on that job, and I was low by $200 on $95,000. And that was quite an interesting town to work in, because the culture of those people in that town are different than Oskaloosa. They were filling barges with grain, and they was fishing in the Mississippi River, and it was just entirely different. And I found out the best way to get along with the people in the town is to stay there overnight and go visit with him, even if it meant in drinking beer with him. And so it was, that job lasted about 3 months, 2.5 months, yeah. And of course, we was right on the river, so they had one of the lines. This was John Hessling, had one of the lines going through a swamp area. Well, believe it or not, I talked him out of hanging the pipe on a bridge instead of going through the swamp. And that was much simpler and much easier. I don't know, if I had to go through that swamp, I don't know what I would have done. And then they had their water tank was up on top of a big hill. When I say hill, it was 500 to 600-700 feet higher than the town. And so when we went up that hill, we kind of went back and forth in a little path that they had up there. And when the water come down off of that, they had to run it through a little box that regulated the pressure because the pressure was too much. And yeah.
Bernie, we sure appreciate your time. I'm sorry to cut you short. We might have to have a part 2 and a part 3 and have you come back.
Well,
But it's after 1 o'clock now, so I want to thank you very much for imparting your history. There was a lot of great stuff there.
well, we well, when it come to 1974, I decided it was time to change occupations, and that's when I started selling machinery and buying a block of ground on North D Street because the city had been awarded a 30-unit apartment house for Oskaloosa, and so I turned in a bid, and I was the only bidder. And that has been my last 44 years, yeah. Too many birthdays. Okay.
Well, thank you again,
Thank you,
Bernie.
Bernie.
And